Here we see our first two Russian verbs. Он говорит, he speaks. Она говорит, she speaks. Он понимает, he understands. Она понимает, she understands. So in this slide, we see Maria and Lee. Maria говорит по-испански. Ли не понимает по-испански. Он говорит по-китайски. We just heard the third person singular forms of those verbs. Он понимает, она понимает. The infinitive of this verb is понимать. You can tell the infinitive form because it usually ends in a «т» мягкий знак. The stem of a verb like понимать, which is a group 1 verb, is usually formed by taking the «т» мягкий знак off the infinitive, which leaves you with this понима, a stem that ends in a vowel. By contrast, there's another group of verbs, the group 2 verbs, conjugation 2, or the second conjugation, and that's the group to which the verb говорить belongs. Говорить, to speak. In this case, we find the stem by chopping off not only the «т» мягкий знак, but also the vowel right before that. So we get a stem that ends in a consonant. R, говор is the stem. So to these present tense stems, we add the endings that go with the pronoun we're using, with the person who is actually doing the action. In this case, we have the third person singular, он, она. So we add the third person ending. All third person forms end in this letter «т». And we see that in the third person plural forms as well. «т», «т». So what's different though between group 1 and group 2 verbs, and also between the singular and plural forms, is the vowel that comes before the letter «т». So, он понимает, они понимают. And with говорить, он говорит, они говорят. One way to tell whether a verb is from group 1 or group 2 is to look at this они ending. It'll be you or u if it's a group 1 verb, and ya or a if it's a group 2 verb. Let's fill in the rest of the personal pronouns. So these are the nominative case forms of the personal pronouns. Я, ты, он, мы, вы, они. I, you, he, she, we, you, they. Here are the rest of the verb forms. Я понимаю, я говорю. So we see that in both groups, the ya form ends in the letter yu. Sometimes it will be written as u in conformity with Russian spelling rules. The ты form will always end in sh мягкий знак. But the vowel that comes right before that ending will be different depending whether it's group 1, which has ye as that vowel, or group 2, which has e as that vowel. So понимаю, понимаешь, понимает, versus говорю, говоришь, говорит. And that ye continues throughout the conjugation of понимать. Мы понимаем, вы понимаете. And the e continues throughout the conjugation of говорить. Мы говорим, вы говорите. So all together, the verb понимать goes like this. Я понимаю, ты понимаешь, он понимает, мы понимаем, вы понимаете, они понимают. Говорить goes like this. Я говорю, ты говоришь, он говорит, мы говорим, вы говорите, они говорят. And that is the pattern that will be followed by most group 1 verbs, and group 2 verbs will respectively follow those two patterns of endings. First person singular, second person singular, third person singular, first person plural, second person plural, third person plural. When we list out a verb, we'll usually list it in that order, just to keep the pattern straight. In the dictionary, you'll find the infinitive form of the verb. Most infinitives end in this temjaki znak ending. Because Russian verbs are conjugated, each person has a different form. In English, we've lost most of those separate forms. We used to say, thou speaketh, he speakest. No, thou speakest, he speaketh, but we don't do that anymore. And now we just say, I speak, you speak. The only one that's different is he speaks, and then we speak, you speak, they speak. So everyone except the third person singular has the same form. In Russian, everyone has their own form. Here's the chart that shows you the pattern of endings. So the first person singular of a group 1 verb will end in you or u, depending on the spelling rules. The ani form will end in yut or ut. The forms in between will have this vowel ye in the conjugation. In a group 2 verb, the ya form will end in yu or sometimes u. The ani form will end in yat or sometimes at. And the forms in between will have this I in the conjugation. So now you can talk about yourself. Ты понимаешь по-русски? Ты говоришь по-русски? На каких языках вы говорите? Я говорю по-русски, по-английски и по-немецки. As long as we're doing verbs, let's also talk about how to make the sentence negative. Я не говорю по-русски. I don't speak Russian. Я не понимаю по-китайски. I don't understand Chinese. Мы не говорим по-японски. We do not speak Japanese. You form the negative sentence by adding this particle nya in front of the verb. This is a bit like English. In English, just to note the relationship. In Russian, нет means no, and nya means not. So the negative particle has the same relationship to the actual word for no, except that in Russian we take the T off to get not, and in English we add it. Here's an exercise you can do for practice. Here you're practicing both toggling between subject pronouns and object pronouns. So ты is the subject pronoun that corresponds to the object pronoun тебя. Я is the subject pronoun, I, that corresponds to the object pronoun меня, me. So in this model, I understand you, but you don't understand me. Because there's a contrast between the first half of the sentence, one person understands, and the second half, where the other person doesn't understand, we use the particle a, which is like and, but introducing a contrast. It's sometimes translated as and, sometimes with but. So, я понимаю тебя, а ты не понимаешь меня. Notice that you also have to conjugate the verb so that it matches the subject pronoun you're using. Finally, you have to remember to use the particle ня to make one of these sentences, one half of the sentence negative. So for number 1, она понимает его, she understands him. А он, but he does not understand her. Go through the exercise and just practice doing all three of these things, using subject and object pronouns, conjugating the verb понимать, and using the particle ня to create negative clauses where appropriate. You can pause the video while you do that. Finally, as long as we're here, let's just look at this particle a and its relationship to the other two particles that can be used to indicate, to join two halves of a sentence together. E is a simple and. It's like a plus sign. It links two clauses that are parallel to each other. So I understand you, and you understand me. We both understand each other. There's no difference between the first half of the sentence and the second. So we could say, я понимаю тебя, и ты понимаешь меня. When there's a contrast, we use a. It has a sense of whereas about it. I understand you, whereas you do not understand me. It compares two things. A is also often used when we have a change of subject. So I do one thing, but he does something else. I play football, but my sister plays lacrosse. In that case, we would use a, because the two halves of that sentence don't contradict each other. They just speak about different things. Nor, which means but, is what we use when there's a contradiction of expectations, when the two halves of the sentence seem to contradict each other, or when something unexpected is introduced. So, here are some examples. Лена и Миша говорят по-русски. Liana and Misha both speak Russian. There's no difference here, there's no contrast, so we use и. Liana говорит по-русски и по-английски. Here we're just noting, we're making a list of languages that Liana speaks. Again, there's no contrast. She speaks one language and the other language. So we use и, the simple and. In the third example here, меня зовут Мария. А вас как зовут? My name is Maria. And what's your name? Here we're switching from talking about me to talking about you. So we use a, the and that includes a shade of contrast, the contrast between me and you. Я говорю по-русски. А вы? Again, I speak Russian, and you. We've changed the person that we're talking about, so we use a, the contrasting particle. Я говорю по-русски хорошо, а по-английски плохо. Here we're talking about two languages that I speak, but there's a contrast between the degree of excellence with which I speak them. So I speak Russian well, but English poorly. So I use a, the particle that delineates that contrast. Finally, in the last example here, я хорошо понимаю по-английски, но очень плохо говорю. I speak Russian well. I understand English well, but I speak it very poorly. Here, you would think that because I understand English so well, I might also speak it well, but I don't. I'm contradicting an expectation that I've set up in the first half of my sentence. So I use но, but, to register that I'm contradicting that expectation. Here's a little exercise you can do to practice filling in I, a, or no. I suggest that you pause the video and do that now.